USDA logo, United States Department of Agriculture.
Every blue bar on this line is a year that was colder than the average temperature of the 20th century. So you see those blue bars are skewing to the left. The red bars are years that are warmer than the 20th century average. So 19 of the 20 warmest years have occurred since 2001. It is likely that the coldest year moving forward will be warmer than the warmest year that we've experienced in the 20th century. So this just gives you a little bit of framework that we're working with. Next slide, thank you. So rising temperatures, shifting rainfall patterns, and increased frequency of extreme weather events affect crop growth, potentially leading to changes in yield, quality, and nutritional content. Warmer temperatures also create favorable conditions for the proliferation of pests and diseases that threaten ag productivity. The spread of plant pathogens and pests may result in reduced crop yields and increased use of pesticides. These increase chemical contaminants on produce, as well as opportunities for foodborne pathogens to enter scarred or injured produce. Climate change can also impact water quality, leading to contamination of irrigation water and water that's used in food processing. These also introduce opportunities for pathogens and toxins into the food supply chain. Coastal areas are particularly vulnerable to sea level rise and storm surges, which can impact aquaculture, contaminate farmland with salt water, and disrupt our supply chains. So let's talk a little bit more about these rising temperatures and their impact specifically on food safety. Warmer temperatures provide, previous slide, yep, there we go. Warmer temperatures provide an ideal environment for the rapid growth of bacteria such as Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria. So this can occur during food production, processing, as well as storage and transportation. And then also, of course, at the consumer level. Rising temperatures also shorten shelf life. Perishable foods such as meat, poultry, dairy products, produce can spoil more quickly in higher temperatures. That increases the risk of consumers injecting those spoiled or contaminated foods, which also accelerates food spoilage, which may not have an impact on food safety, but it certainly impacts food security and access when we're looking at spoilage and shelf life. There has also been shown to be an increased incidence of foodborne illness. So as temperature rises, the occurrence of foodborne illness tends to increase. The pathogens grow significantly faster, and people are more likely to actually become sick from ingesting those higher concentrations of pathogens. There are also challenges in maintaining proper temperature as the temperature rises. Proper storage, transportation temperatures for perishable foods, especially in regions with extreme heat, are more difficult to maintain. These temperature fluctuations can lead to food safety risks. Higher temperatures can negatively affect the quality of water sources that are used for irrigation, processing, and cleaning produce and other foods in the food supply chain. These contaminated water can is another opportunity to introduce pathogens into the food system. In warmer climates, disease vectors like insects and rodents may thrive, potentially transmitting diseases to crop or food storage facilities. Talk a little bit about these rising seawater temperatures. Rising seawater temperatures can have significant implications for food safety, particularly concerning seafood and the risk of foodborne illness. Rising seawater temperatures are an ideal breeding ground for certain pathogenic bacteria such as Vibrio parahemolyticus and Vibrio vulnificus, which thrive in these warmer conditions. Vibrio bacteria are commonly associated with seafood-related foodborne illnesses. Elevated sea temperatures can lead to higher concentrations of Vibrio bacteria in marine environments, increasing the likelihood of contamination in seafood. Filter feeding shellfish like oysters, clams, mussels accumulate these Vibrio bacteria that are present in seawater, and when they're often consumed raw or undercooked, these contaminated shellfish pose a risk of transmitting Vibrio infections to humans, especially high-risk individuals. Rising sea temperatures can contribute to the proliferation of harmful algal blooms, such as red tides. Some of these algae produce toxins that can accumulate in filter feeding shellfish and other seafood, posing a risk to consumers. Filter feeding shellfish can ingest these toxins, making them potentially harmful if consumed. High sea temperatures can lead to more frequent and prolonged algal blooms, thereby increasing the risk of the toxin accumulation. Rising sea temperatures also make it more challenging to maintain cold chain storage during seafood processing and transportation. So if seafood is exposed to higher temperatures for longer times, it can become more susceptible to bacterial growth and spoilage. The increased presence of Vibrio bacteria and toxins in seafood can lead to more frequent foodborne illness outbreaks, posing significant public health risks for those consuming these products. So how does all this tie back to NIFA and what we do at NIFA? NIFA is an extramural science funding agency within the Research, Education, and Economics mission area at USDA. And we invest in supporting initiatives that ensure the longer-term viability of agriculture. NIFA specifically provides both funding and strategic leadership for programs that ensure groundbreaking discoveries in ag-related sciences and technologies and make sure they reach the people who can put them into practice. The vast majority of our funding, both competitive and non-competitive, are awarded to our land-grant partners across the U.S. This map depicts our land-grant university partners. So in May 2022, NIFA created a climate adaptation and resilience plan. Components of this plan are found across USDA NIFA's competitive and non-competitive program portfolio, in addition to the food safety and nutrition portfolio, of course. What we know is that increased temperature, drought, rainfall, variability, extreme weather, and ocean acidification associated with climate change is related to reduced food production, altered nutrient content, inequitable access to healthy foods and beverages, and high rates of food insecurity. It also emphasizes equity and tackling longstanding health disparities. Climate change and its varied effects, including extreme weather events and longer-term degradation and loss of resources, can create new insecurities and exacerbate existing inequities. Black, Hispanic, and Native Americans, as well as people living in rural and lower income communities, experience the greater disparities when it comes to the impacts of climate change. Food systems, local, regional, and global food systems are weakened because of emerging climate change impacts on agriculture productivity. At the local level, climate change threatens indigenous food systems and the production of and access to traditional foods. Food safety and processing is impacted by availability of water and extreme weather events. Water stress impacts water costs and therefore the cost of properly cleaning food products. Extreme weather can cause disruptions to food processing and distribution that may expose food to unsafe temperatures. Such disruptions can directly affect food preservation and safety, which has serious consequences for health. Transportation, storage, preservation, and access points, such as grocery stores, markets, and food banks, to nutritious, safe food will be impacted both by rising temperatures and severe weather events that interrupt supply chain infrastructure. Limited food access has direct implications for community health, particularly within historically underserved communities. The heart of this plan has been incorporated into NIFA's food safety programs. Now I'll talk a little bit about NIFA's food safety programs. The Food Waste and Loss Program solicits research and extension projects that address 2 or more food loss and waste priorities. It assesses the interrelationship between food loss and food and nutrition security, healthy food programs and practices, and environmental impacts. It also looks at the adoption and management of resource conserving and risk mitigation for post-production practices to reduce food waste. The program supports strategies for planning and implementing food loss and waste efforts, targeting food loss and waste anywhere from farm to table, and that includes local, small, regional, and urban production efforts. It also looks to catalyze innovation and technologies to reduce food waste and increase consumer food safety and knowledge of food preservation. The Novel Foods and Innovative Manufacturing Technologies Program focuses on research projects to develop risk-based approaches to ensure the quality, safety, and nutrition of novel foods and food ingredients. Another program we have at NIFA is the Mitigating Antimicrobial Resistance Across the Food Chain program, which develops, refines, and disseminates science-based knowledge about food and ag management and production practices that can sustainably mitigate or reduce the risk of antimicrobial resistance across the food chain. Another program is the Small Business Innovation Research Program, which has an investigator-driven food science and nutrition portfolio that broadly covers food science and nutrition topics and has sustainability language incorporated into and within the program priorities. Many projects funded under the SBIR program are looking at sustainable technologies to incorporate into food processing. The AFRI Food Safety and Defense Program addresses basic and applied research that reduces the risk of intentional or unintentional contamination in foods, looking at the physical, chemical, and biological approach. One of the priority of the programs is to address the Closer to Zero initiatives that looks to remove heavy metals from the food supply chain, including produce. The Food Safety Outreach Program goals are to provide training, education, and outreach to address FSMA goals. Projects that promote education and outreach, looking at best practices for sustainable producers and processors, are highly encouraged to apply. The last thing I'll discuss is USDA's Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate, or AIM for Climate. It's an initiative aimed at promoting agriculture innovation and sustainability while addressing the challenges posed by climate change. Food safety is a critical aspect of this initiative as it intersects with the broader goal of achieving climate resilience in agriculture. You'll find the goals of this initiative throughout all of NIFA's food safety and nutrition and food security programs. AIM for Climate encourages the adoption of climate-resilient agricultural practices. These practices not only help farmers mitigate the effects of climate change, but also contribute to food safety. For example, improved water management can prevent contamination of crops and reduce the risk of foodborne illness. Sustainable farming practices that are promoted by AIM for Climate, such as crop rotation, reduce pesticide use, and organic farming can lead to safer food production by reducing the resilience on chemical inputs and minimizing contamination risks. These risks, which could potentially be exacerbated during flooding. AIM for Climate emphasizes the importance of soil health and climate resilience. Healthy soils are less prone to pathogens and contaminants, reducing the risk of soil-related food safety issues. The initiative supports the use of precision agriculture technologies, which can optimize resource use, reduce waste, and improve the accuracy of pesticide and fertilizer application, thus enhancing food safety. Climate change can also disrupt supply chains, potentially affecting the safety of food products during transportation and storage. AIM for Climate seeks to build more resilient supply chains that can better withstand climate-related disruptions, ensuring the safety of food products. USDA's AIM for Climate initiative recognizes that climate change and food safety are interconnected challenges in agriculture. By promoting sustainable and resilient farming practices, encouraging innovation, and fostering collaboration amongst our stakeholders, AIM for Climate contributes to the broader goal of ensuring food safety in a changing climate. It recognizes that addressing food safety is an integral part of building a more sustainable and resilient agricultural system. I think we're taking questions after the next.
Yeah, we're collecting questions in the chat. If anyone has questions as we go through, please feel free to leave those in the chat and we're collecting them. And then at the end, we'll come together and do them all at once. So thanks, Jody.
Hi, I'm very excited to follow my colleague, Dr. Jody Williams. She's fantastic, and she gave a great overview of how and why we're seeing intersections between climate change, food systems, and food safety, and really gave a nice highlight of all the work NIFA is doing to really investigate these intersections through research, education, and extension. I will note we will give the slides in a PDF version, and we can pull out all the relevant slides. Given the Wikipedia nature of this event today. In my slides, you'll see websites relevant to all the material on the bottom, and we'll try to put those in the chat for today. But again, we will compile these. Again, given the wiki nature of this call, we really want to make sure you have news you can use and link to. So the goal of my presentation is to complement Dr. Williams and dive a little bit deeper on how NIFA approaches both our interagency efforts across our various institutes to do work like this, our interdepartmental effort of how we work across the USDA, also our intergovernment work, how we work across a variety of federal agencies to do this work, and then also how we work with stakeholders in the external sphere, whether it's academic, non-government, or small businesses or private entities. So with that, I want to highlight, I'll be lifting up work that I do in my role as a national science liaison at NIFA, covering food safety and nutrition. So I'll highlight a lot of the intersections we're working through there to tackle food and nutrition insecurity. And then also I'll be lifting up my role as founding an intergovernment work group that I'll talk about later today that focuses on climate change, food systems, and nutrition security. And with that, the role of food safety. Next slide. I want to start and really emphasize, like Dr. Williams did, that we have new leadership at USDA, and he is very much interested in seeing these intersections between climate, food systems, nutrition, and food safety. And he comes from a soil science background. A lot of his work as being the new director of NIFA will be realizing our potential, right? Building us back and showing how we can be fully staffed from a workforce perspective, improve our processes, including re-engineering our requests for funding, and then also our reporting system so we can lift up impacts in this area and find areas of missed opportunity. So I do really want to highlight a lot of our work for both our interagency effort, our interdepartment efforts, and also our intergovernment efforts. And our work with all of our stakeholders, including all of you here today, is very much being pushed and inspired by our new leadership, Dr. Mesra. Next slide. I want to highlight this cross-priority approach very much fits into the fabric of how NIFA has historically approached agricultural sciences and how we've used our integrative approach for research, education, and extension to really solve complex problems. And this includes climate change and its intersections with food safety. Illustrated here, you can see how we've been working together across 5 priority teams to really think through how we can advance knowledge, gaps and opportunities, how we can spur innovation and accelerate change, how we can empower individuals and communities, and really support synergies across these diverse priorities. It's a work in progress. Even earlier today, I was talking with a colleague about, just trying to kind of find common language and also ensure when we're reviewing documents about climate, we have the right food safety expertise and vice versa. And we really appreciate through Wiki and through our experts here today, again, your help with us ensuring how to do these innovative cross-disciplinary activities and really, again, complex problems. So again, it does take a village, and really do want to make sure we have the right information out there, the right people helping put this together. And again, really finding impactful and meaningful ways to move forward on these important issues. Next slide. An important piece to our cross-priority approach is really, an important piece to our cross-priority approach is really elevating the role of youth. Many of you guys as youth, as parents, and or as teachers know they just bring an invaluable perspective to this work and are also the next generation and pipeline for the work that we want to do. So a part of our effort is our large investment and partnership with the National 4-H. And again, we have a variety of other ways where we really foster positive youth development. And particularly in these areas of climate change, food systems, nutrition security, and food safety, we've not only been trying to kind of get their perspectives on the how-to, but also hopefully inspire them being interested in doing the work. So I do want to lift that up in terms of Wiki, is just really emphasizing the role of youth and where they can be a key player in this work ahead. Next slide. So as pointed out earlier with Dr. Williams, really broad array of highlighting all the food safety relevant programs that we have available for external funding and support in this place. I wanted to highlight this compilation here from a nutrition and food systems perspective that will give you all the links, right? So how do I find all those programs that she was talking about? So here's the website. And again, as you follow along with me today, there'll be a lot of websites that you can link to. And then our National Ag Library staff will helpfully compile all this for us as well, so you have them handy as you're working through your wiki workshop later today. But I want to highlight at NIFA, we have been trying, and we're still a work in progress here, to compile our key relevant resources across a couple key topic areas. So this is an example of our compilation around nutrition and food system relevant funding sources. And many of the ones that Dr. Williams went through earlier today with kind of the great illustrations, animated, are really listed here, and then also more on this website. And we also have compilations for NIFA's food loss and food waste topical areas that are compiled in one place. Also, NIFA's food and nutrition security are compiled in one place. And then this fall, we'll be having a webinar on our NIFA relevant local and regional food system relevant funding sources. And so that will also have a new topic page that will launch with that. We're also working on a variety of other topic pages that compile resources that are relevant to today's topic, including tribal food sovereignty. And again, as mentioned earlier, our youth investments. Next slide. So in terms of highlighting not only our interagency efforts at NIFA that we've really worked on the last two and a half years, particularly around climate and nutrition and food safety, I want to highlight the work that we do across our department and across the federal family and with all of you in a variety of efforts to tackle food and nutrition security, which includes ensuring our food is safe. And so a key part of that work has been helping with the historic White House conference, which happened last fall and will be celebrating its first anniversary this September 28th. When the day before that day before that conference, a corresponding national strategy was published. And here you'll see that there was 5 pillars that really set out a roadmap for implementing the national strategy. And the strategy was really a goal across the government to figure out how we can end hunger, improve nutrition and physical activity, and reduce diet-related diseases and disparities. And a key part of that we recognize is thinking through intersections around climate, food systems, and food safety. And you'll see that in the actions put forth in Pillar 5, which was again enhancing nutrition and food security research, which included work around climate, food systems, and food safety. Next slide. Particularly called out in this action area was the investments that NIFA, among other colleagues, are making in a National Academy endeavor focused on exploring linkages between soil health and human health. This is a very exciting investment for us. It's going to bring experts across the globe together to really think through what do we know and what do we don't know about the relationship between soil health and human health. And again, this will provide a lot of insights as it relates to climate change and food safety. And we're very excited about how this intersects with some of our other work that we work with our FDA colleagues on, our Food and Drug Administration colleagues on, related to their Closer to Zero effort to eliminate toxins from key targeted foods. So we're really excited about this investment. And again, as you're Wikipediaing, again, I want to make sure you have the links and are thinking through how these types of investments with some of our external colleagues, like the National Academy, can help us really understand the science and really hopefully solve these key problems. Now, transitioning to the next slide, I'd like to talk a little bit about the work I do in the intergovernment space. And really, again, this was something NIF has been a part of in terms of the U.S. Global Change Research Program. We're one of several USDA agencies and we're really one of several federal agencies that participate in this program. So I want to talk a little bit about what exactly it is. It is a congressional mandate. It was mandated back in 1990. And it essentially helps us coordinate across the federal family around our research for global change. And so you can see an exciting quote here describing it. And it really says it's a comprehensive and integrated United States research program and will assist the nation and the world to understand, assess, predict, and respond to human-induced and natural processes of global change. And it's been exciting as both a nutrition scientist and one who works very often with food safety to see how this program has been very embracive of scientists in nutrition and food safety and understanding those intersections. So This is really a great infrastructure for our intergovernment work around this topic, and want to draw attention about what it is and how it helps us advance this area of research. Next slide. So this gives you a little bit more of detail about how the U.S. Global Change Research Program is structured and how it interacts across the federal government, and really, again, how it has an infrastructure that really has high-level thought leaders in this, but really, again, pulls together all the scientists and relevant staff across the federal family, including communication, government relations, that really help us think through where we're at on global change research. So again, here you'll see, and I'll talk about it later, all the agencies that this pulls together. So again, from an intergovernment perspective, this has been a great way for NIFA to not only ensure we're working within our agency on these complex problems within our department, but also with our other federal colleagues. And again, I'll detail these more coming up. Next slide. So I want to highlight for the U.S. Global Change Research Program, infrastructure. It really brings together a lot of high-level government officials, but again, it brings together over 400 individuals who participate across the 14 federal member agencies. And they've developed interagency work groups that help us move the work forward on key targeted areas. These include climate cycle, observations, modeling, human health, social sciences, coasts, international activities, sustained assessment, indicators, integrated water cycle, and adaptation and resilience. And you can see, and really, when I look back at the website last week, all of these interagency groups are relevant to today's topic. And so as you're Wikipedia, I would say go through this website and really look through all of the interworking groups and see the content that they're working on and the projects that they're working on, and how, again, they can be helpful to thinking through climate change and food safety. I'm going to dive deep on the human health work group, which is the one I participate in and have built a work stream around food systems in. Next slide. So for the climate change and human health group, this is, again, an interagency group as part of the U.S. Global Change Research Program. This group was chartered back in 2009, and it works on coordinating, implementing, evaluating, and communicating federal research and scientific activities related to human health, which includes food safety, and their impacts on the global climate change. This group works to address key gaps in understanding of human health related to aspects of global change. It develops data-driven scientific products such as tools, indicators, and assessments. And I'm going to talk later about a project we're working on related to a food safety relevant indicator. And also it facilitates multi-directional communication among federal stakeholders to ensure federal research efforts are user-driven. So again, as we think through this topic area of climate and food safety, I want to just really emphasize the importance of intergovernment work, but also that work with understanding the end user, whether that's a wiki person or somebody who's doing food safety on the front lines. We really have to understand how our research could be translated into practice, and also how we can address gaps in the field. Next slide. So big picture, the Climate Change and Human Health Group works on a variety of activities. Here is just a broad list of how that categorizes the activities. Again, the key being research, thinking through an inventory and synthesis of what we know and what we don't know around climate change and human health. They help with data integration, which helps us develop forecast capabilities for climate and health on seasonal to sub-seasonal time scale. They help with the assessments and indicators and developing a framework for doing that in the human health space. They also work extensively with international efforts. A couple of them are highlighted here, including the Belmont Forum. This includes the Workstream on climate change, food systems, and nutrition security, which I developed and I'll talk on more today. And again, a big piece of this is communication, engagement, and education, and thinking how whether our websites, toolkits, and other resources through webinars and presentation are meeting the needs of end users like you. Next slide. So as I mentioned, with the broader U.S. Global Change Research Program, there's more than 14 federal agencies that are brought to the table through the congressional mandate, and each of them participate in various interagency work groups as it makes sense for their departmental charge. And so through that broad network for the program, we were able to recruit and build a work stream dedicated and focused on climate change, food systems, and nutrition security that has over 100 members. And the exciting part for me about this membership is more than half never were a part of the U.S. Global Change Research Program, right? We're bringing food systems, food safety, food scientists, nutrition scientists to the table with this climate group that maybe just didn't have the time, bandwidth, or invitation to do this work before. So we're really exciting as we built out this group over the last 2 years to bring to the table new perspectives to the U.S. Global Change Research Program. And part of that is, figuring out what the program is and how it could be helpful for the coordinated work in this space. And really, again, kind of walking through that common language piece that is required around complex scientific issues and problems like climate change and food safety. So again, I'm not going to go through all the logos highlighted here, but just to say, to me, it's always exciting when you do intergovernment work of just sometimes there's the usual suspects like USDA at the table on a food system work, but also I think folks are excited and intrigued to see how NASA plays a role in this, how the National Science Foundation plays a role in this, how the Department of Interior, a host of other key federal departments. And again, this helps with not only building the evidence base, but also translating into practice and thinking through where and how we can do that across our broad federal footprint. I want to dive a little bit deeper into the rationale of the work stream and the work that we're doing. So I'm going to transition to the next slide. And not surprising, again, you see very similar pictures in terms of NIFA's approach to the cross-priority approach that I've similarly used that kind of cross-priority thinking for this work stream. We are bringing together a variety of topical areas. And really, again, as we built out the over 100 members, the variety of federal agencies at the table, and the activities and approaches that we're taking on, we're very much coming out of a post-COVID recovery phase, but very much kind of thinking through where and how we can move forward around these complex but urgent topics of climate change, food systems, and nutrition security. So again, from just kind of the basic rationale, I thought Dr. Williams gave a great job of saying why this is important, how folks in the research space are thinking about it, and really for us in the intergovernment space, we're just trying to kind of collate how we're doing this together and how we can think through these issues across the various government agencies and bring together our various stakeholders' issues and opportunities in a more coordinated way. Next slide. So again, this is a little bit of a busy slide, but really just want to talk through, how we do this in the intergovernment world. So from a wiki space, just kind of thinking through those initial steps and activities and contributions a work stream can have to a larger issue. So again, a lot of the actions that we're taking are very much kind of synonymous with kind of building a federal coordinating group effort. We just kind of work through identifying the relevant members, which I talked about earlier. We think through coordinating and getting to know each other, right? Just like, what are you doing at USDA? What are you doing at NIH? What are you doing at National Science Foundation? Really get to know the faces to the work, but also the RFA links and the distribution networks that we all bring to the table in terms of sharing out this relevant information, both internally within our government groups, but also within our external stakeholders. But again, we encourage a lot of participating agencies to provide overviews of their work and really develop the formative relationships of working together and figuring out where we can braid funding, where we can supplement funding, and where, again, we might do collaborative and intergovernment work. I want to highlight as one example, through these connections and others, we were able to form an effort with the National Science Foundation to support their convergent accelerator work around climate and food systems, food safety and nutrition related funding. So we want to, again, kind of be able to get to know each other in these work steps, but also think through where and how we can support each other through intergovernment agreements, co-funding, and supportive efforts. So again, really want to illustrate the importance of these types of work streams for us kind of coordinating around those types of activities. And again, just emphasizing, we try to catalog the relevant work. So as we're getting asked about research, we kind of know what each other has funded, what we found, where the gaps remain. And so that remains an important piece of our work. And also the relevant data sources. I mentioned earlier that half of the member group was not, climate folks, right? And so they're learning about relevant climate sources. And same thing with our climate colleagues. They're learning about food security data, nutrition data, food safety data, a variety of other data sources, but also data linkages that could be really important for this work ahead and being able to do the work for our intramural community, but also support the work through our extramural funding agencies. And we are considering scientific symposium. We were very much thinking about the nutritional value of food during a changing climate. That's been a very hot topic for us that we've presented on a lot internally. And again, I mentioned earlier the NASEM work we're doing with the National Academy, which again, I think is providing that kind of more external forum for thinking through the science around soil health and human health. So that will be informative for our work ahead. At this point, I'd like to transition to our collaborative work with the indicators work group of the U.S. Global Change Research Program. The next slide will give an illustration of this deeper dive case study, and it very much falls in the food safety space. And as my colleague, Dr. Williams, brought up earlier, we are increasingly seeing how Vibriosis is impacting climate, it's being impacted by climate and having impacts on food safety as a human health issue. So again, from Vibriosis, we see changes in climate have shown to affect the distribution and the proliferation of bacteria causing Vibriosis and cholera in humans. And next slide. And as mentioned earlier by Dr. Williams, we do see the main climate drivers include rising sea surface temperatures for Vibrio exposures and infection. And in the case of cholera, heavy participation, which include extreme weather events. So again, through science, we've been able to see these associations and increase in prevalence. And again, that is important for human health, as we see in the next slide, how people who are exposed to these pathogens through things like raw food or dermal contact or eye and ear contact could have ultimate human health impacts. So next slide. So again, from a human health perspective, and again, I tried to provide all the citations here, and I could give more detail or the hyperlinks as needed following the presentation if helpful for the wiki workshop. But again, the case study for us, for our purposes for human health, really detail a variety of increased adverse health outcomes associated with Vibriosis, and again, in this context of changing climate drivers. So from an adaptation and mediation standpoint, next slide, there's been a lot of literature calling for, thinking through risk exposures and thinking through how we can reduce the risk of Vibriosis among human health. And so that's part of our driver and our joint work with the indicator work group of the U.S. Global Change Research Program is to think through how we might develop indicators around food safety in the Vibriosis case study. Next slide. So this is a busy slide, but I think is really important as I work with my colleague in the indicators work group and who's led publications in the indicator space around other indicators, is thinking through how we identify relevant indicators. And again, this was an important process for us as we worked across climate, nutrition, food safety, colleagues, is just thinking through how these terms like indicator might be different or perceived different or measured different or talked about differently across different groups. And so again, from our standpoint, it was really helpful for Dr. Ann Liu, to talk through kind of like what are the pieces that will be helpful for us to think through identifying indicators. And so we have a variety of indicators that have identified in the climate space. These publications and this bulleted list kind of capture that process. And again, I just want to highlight for our wikiing today, each of these have relevant narrative reviews about how important steps are taken to identify indicators, and then how practically that's translated into like the practice and policy space. So the next slide is again pretty illustrative of how you create an indicator system. And again, it provides a lot of key steps about how to do this in terms of developing a framework, developing the relevant literature, thinking through key risk factors, thinking through the data sets that you have available, thinking about the methodology needed to assess calculating indicators and risk factors, and again, thinking through the metadata that's going to help you do that. And again, socializing these decisions with subject matter experts and other stakeholders so they understand why this is an indicator, how you came to this, and how it can be used in policy, research, and practice. So again, this is a very kind of linear slide design, but really wanted to emphasize this is a very iterative process And so again, a lot of these feedback loops really feed into each other in terms of creating an indicator system. And right now, as we are kind of in key preliminary steps of doing this for Vibriosis, I'm just seeing how important each of these steps are as we move forward, and opportunities like today to kind of share with you where we are in our preliminary analyses and steps forward, and welcome feedback. So I want to transition to the last slide today and giving you a preliminary assessment of kind of what we're doing to do a case study on Vibriosis and developing an indicator in the space. So the next slide is very much a full circle moment in terms of highlighting this webinar host today in terms of the USDA National Agriculture Library. I'm a big fan of the National Ag Library from the variety of resources they provide. They also provide a lot of literature review support for us here in the federal system. And so they're working with us on this intergovernment group and providing us with the librarian support to conduct some form of kind of scoping and narrative review in this space, so we can find the literature needed to inform a creation of an indicator in the Vibriosis space. So it's small slides, I'm sure, as many of you guys who've done systematic reviews and have all your little methodology steps listed out. But again, you'll get the slides as a copy for today. And really, again, if you're interested in learning more about this case study, we're happy to meet with you one-on-one and kind of walk through what we're doing. We very much appreciate subject matter experts, as we are really in the key steps now of kind of diving through the literature. But the National Ag Library, again, just from a wiki perspective, just want to say how important they are for us for finding the key literature in this space, and doing that with our variety of databases that we have available for us in the federal government, but also the great literature in this space. And again, thinking through how to scope this and scale it so we can formulate an indicator. So again, you can see some of the indicator, the inclusion and exclusion criteria we have, and again, kind of the narrowing of terms that we have. And again, this very much focuses on Vibriosis, and just from a scoping perspective, at this stage, we're not looking at cholera. So again, at this point, I want to be able to transition to questions, and I really do want to conclude with the important part that I see the Wikipedia has in all of this. We are in an area of time where we are thinking through and seeing intersections between climate change and food safety. And I really do see the importance of not only the research folks in the space, the educators and extension, but also our variety of end users and stakeholders, helping us understand these relationships, but also helping us prioritize the path forward. And again, hopefully seeing where we can make change and improving public health in this space. So I want to transition at this point to taking questions with my colleague, Dr. Williams, and again, give a heartfelt thanks to our colleagues at the National Ag Library for all they do to support our case study, our broader work around climate and food safety. And again, particularly hosting today's Wikipedia event, where we'll see all of you, not only your time presenting today, but in the Wiki workshop, really helping with the fruits of your labor, helping us devise a path forward for not only understanding what we have out in the content world, but where there might be gaps in terms of understanding this and developing an effective wiki page. So with that, I'll hand it off to our moderator and welcome any questions today. And again, when you get the slides, there will be a variety of other resources that we have at NIFA that are included at the end of the deck, the appendix slides. They talk about how to volunteer. So we need reviewers in this space that bring diverse and cross-disciplinary perspectives. We have a lot of our grant resources summarized and provided, our calendar of events, including that webinar on local and regional food systems I mentioned earlier. And again, how to sign up for updates. We love to highlight not only our RFAs in this space, but also you and the impacts our various grantees have. So please sign up for updates and feel free to ask me or Dr. Williams questions of how to do that in the questions today. So with that, I'll hand it off.
Okay, well, thank you to our presenters. I'm now going to transition to some of the questions that were asked during the presentations. Our first question is, can you describe how elevated temperatures, such as extended heat wave temperatures, can affect plant transpiration, plant injury, or mortality? The second part of this question is there a threshold for distinct groups of plants, especially blueberry bushes in the Northwest?
So I can go ahead and start with this is out of my area of expertise. My area is food safety and food science. But what I can share with you is that NIFA does provide research, education, and extension grants in this space. And I can provide links to the NIFA program that would potentially be working in this area. Also on those, under that program area, you'll also be able to find currently funded projects and be able to access those currently funded projects, as well as the subject matter expert within that particular area. So I'll look for that and put it in the chat. If I don't have time to get it in the chat, I will get it to Jamie so she can provide it. Sheila, anything else?
No, I think that's a great response.
Okay, great. So we're going to move on to the next question. How are you working with other parts of USDA and farmers to adapt some of these changes in their farming practices? One of the comments was that they'd like to move from corporate farming techniques to these other sustainable farming techniques, even if it interrupts the corporate farm lobbies. So if you can give us your perspective.
So I did respond in the chat. I said that NIFA provides funding and research education extension and partners with cooperative extension and community-based organizations as our boots on the ground to get the best practices out to producers and processors. For the second part, corporate farming techniques to these, for that last piece, I can just reiterate that we provide the outreach and education to the producers for adoption, and that is across the board.
Yeah, I do want to really emphasize at NIFA, the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, one of our key extramural funding agencies at USDA, the integrative approach that we take. So as Dr. Williams is elevating, we try to do research, education, and extension. And to me, that's the key piece. So you're lifting up a key stakeholder group of farmers is really through not only researching and working with them of like, what are their key needs and opportunities in this space, but also, again, how can we educate the next generation of farmers? How can we use continuing education through extension and other forms of education to really build the next generation here? And again, when you go to that nutrition and food system compilation I highlighted, it brings out our USDA Climate Hubs work, which has a huge extension focus and a key and growing focus on how those works intersect with nutrition and food safety. I also want to really highlight and give shout out to our sustainable agriculture systems team that's really grown as an interdisciplinary and inter-institute approach here at NIFA to really think through how we holistically do this. And again, not only training the next generation of farmers and current farmers, but again, thinking through all those cross-science implications of the work they do, including food safety. I also want to lift up our SAR program, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. That is very much designed at a regional level, where we do, again, have a lot of key touch points with farmers and those on the ground working in this space. And I also want to highlight our recent and new innovation that we have here at NIFA. It's a rapid response RFA, which is new for us. And that's around extreme weather events. And that's, again, in current issues that we're seeing, like in Hawaii and Florida, that you can apply to really get that baseline information. And so farmers and various other communities can kind of think through how they want to leverage our funding support through research, education, and extension to really move forward on the science in this area, but also, again, kind of translate those messages into practice, including farming practices. So it's an important area. I think it's something that NIFA continues to work across USDA on and across our external community about how to prioritize the key needs. And again, ultimately, how to get to those key end users of farmers and also consumers in terms of elevating the importance of these issues. And I want to make sure we didn't miss a question as I'm kind of looking back now at the chat. You know, somebody mentioned intersections with SNAP, and I really do want to elevate. I didn't highlight for today's purposes with our focus on climate and food safety, but NIFA has had really strong intergovernment relationships with our colleagues at Food and Nutrition Service who administer SNAP. I'm in a detail situation between NIFA and FNS. We've had growing and increasingly strong connections with our FNS colleagues. Two key programs I want to elevate today are GUSNIP. So that's the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program that works with our SNAP colleagues to provide nutrition incentives, now produce prescription projects, a variety of things that really help elevate the connection between farmers, the local economies, and also consumers who are in historically underserved communities. And we're seeing great and promising findings in our year 3 impacts from GUSNIP. And I think, again, we're only getting started with kind of understanding those relationships As it relates to climate and food safety, again, I think we're seeing how we can really leverage our reach within federal nutrition assistance and federal nutrition education programs to not only uplift nutrition messages that are super important, food safety messages, which are super important, and then increasingly how we can make those connections about environmental sustainability as well. So it's definitely an area of exploration that we're figuring out how we can do better, and welcome input as we move that forward. And again, that's where in a wiki nature, as you're compiling some of this stuff, you can definitely uplift what we're doing and where the opportunities to do better come from your recommendations. Now I'll go back to the moderator in terms of looking back at the chat so we didn't miss questions.
Okay, well, I would like to also add a resource to all that's talked about today. So if in the chat, you'll see there's a comment that asks if anyone would like to search the NAL Food Safety Research Information Office, you can go to our tool called the Research Projects Database, where you can learn about NIFA and other research funded in various topical areas. So that link is provided for you in the chat box.
Thank you. And again, just to elevate resources, a lot of what Dr. Williams and I are highlighting are very, I'd say, academic or research focused, right? They're very much targeting a large part of our academic community that are applying for research funding, but a lot of our funding links are also available for non-government and community-based organizations and small business organizations. And the key thing I like to emphasize is as you see something you like and you want to learn, don't be shy to reach out to program officers like Jody Williams, national science liaisons like me that help you navigate our agencies and our program leads that can help you learn more. And that's even if you're not seeking funding, you just want to kind of understand how does a federal extramural agency work in this space, you know, what are resources that they have available. So we're always very much available and willing to kind of walk through our materials and our work and how it might best fit the needs that you have, whether it's developing a wiki page or other communication, engagement, and educational resources that you're working through.
Great. So we have about 2 minutes left. And so I have time for one question. Can you share any lessons learned from the global change work groups on collaboration, not only across the science disciplines, but also across the federal agencies? And you did talk about that, but what are the barriers to effective collaboration and how do you address them with such a, large group?
Well, I touched on some, I think, earlier, just in terms of like the wide swath of federal agencies that are involved. I mean, just even in the climate, that's 14 agencies. When we talk about the national strategy on hunger, nutrition, and health, that was over 20 agencies. So I think some people appreciate like the government is like just like this one, thing. And it's, it's a variety of agencies. So sometimes it's just getting the right people in the room at the right time and making sure we're kind of speaking the same language, and particularly across departmental language barriers and or science barriers like we have in climate and food safety. It's just kind of being patient with each other and working through and just really encouraging our colleagues not be afraid to ask questions or to seek clarification or to explain like, hey, in our community, this is what we do and why, right? So I think it's just really important to be patient but persistent with building these types of collaborations, whether at the federal level or at a state or local or in a private sector level where you might work. I will also lift up in terms of lessons learned. I think one of the big things for me is, again, when we were building our membership, half aren't from this group, right? Like they're learning the program, but they're very excited and leaning into it. And so again, I think it's really important as we think through these topic areas is just, again, kind of create that fun and informative and hopefully engaging space for folks to connect across disciplines. And I will say, at least as a barrier, one of the barriers, which is kind of a good thing, is just all the exciting things that are going on in the climate and nutrition space over the last years, and just trying to make sure we have the capacity to do all of them, not only individually in terms of addressing things like Justice 40 and all the executive orders that came from the president around climate, but all the various work that the president had on nutrition, like the historic White House conference, like the national strategy. So those are two separate kind of key areas that are moving forward with a lot of exciting things, but then how do you kind of marry them together? So that's the exciting part that I think we're working through, but the barriers just, again, kind of maximizing the moment and kind of working through some of the capacity barriers some of our staff have. And again, sometimes the funding that we have to kind of work through with like all these key problems, but how do you kind of do that with a limited pool of funding sometimes? So I think it's fun, but it's also, again, one of those things you just have to kind of make the most of what you have and kind of think through if some barriers are challenging, how can you kind of pivot to other things that you can kind of do better together. So for us, again, with the Vibriosis case study, one barrier is I'm not a food safety expert. I work a lot with food safety colleagues like Dr. Williams, but that's not my area of expertise. So helping to kind of coordinate the Vibriosis case study, one limitation is sometimes my capacity and really leaning on subject matter experts that we've brought together from a variety of agencies. And you, right? Like really want to encourage the listeners to help us with that as they're interested. So again, I think there's a lot of lessons learned. And for me, a lot of barriers are just opportunities to kind of move forward that we just have to kind of be creative problem solvers for. So hopefully as you transition to the Wiki workshop today, we've inspired you with some of the key content that we can have, but really, again, inspired you to kind of think through where we could do better. So just don't be shy to let us know.
Well, thank you again to both of our presenters, and I'm going to transition over to Jamie to move us into the next topic area.
USDA is an equal opportunity provider, employer, and lender.